So while there was good wrestling out there this week, it seemed like more of the drama happened out of the ring. We're going to talk about that. Review AEW Dynamite next on the Squared Circle Psycho Babble. My name is Michael Valenti. Joining me is Ralph Valenti. Ralph, for the past, let's say, 10 days or so, we've seen back and forth conversations. We have seen jabs. We have seen comments. We have seen counter programming. And all between AEW Dynamite or AEW and WWE, all because Smackdown was supersized this past Friday, 2.5 hours. I'll be honest, not really sure why they did it. You can have your conspiracy theories. They only did it because of Rampage. They did it because Fox let them. But nonetheless, it happened. Then Tony Khan goes on Twitter and says, "I can't wait to beat you head-to-head on your main show." That got everybody wild up. Then Roman Reigns, on an interview with Complex Sports, basically says CM Punk is not what he used to be. And I look at that roster and I could throw them out all out of a club, and they're all little brothers to me. Junior Dos Santos goes in and is like, dude, you just tell me where this club is and I'll meet you there. Then Top Dollar gets in and he makes fun of the Young Bucks in their shoes. Then Max Caster busts a rap on NXT and Top Dollar. So a lot of back and forth here. So Ralph, what do you think of all this back and forth between AEW and WWE?
Well, for starters, I think that a lot of it is supposed to be meant to be fun, because at the end of the day, if people are talking about wrestling in general, whether you support AEW or whether you support WWE, I think that's a good thing for the industry across the board. Now, in certain cases, can you kind of nitpick or look at certain tweets and certain situations and things that were said and be disappointed, be aggravated, think it's funny? I think everybody's going to apply a different emotion to each individual situation, each individual tweet, each individual thing that's said.
Mm-hmm.
I think with Tony Khan at this point, I'm truly convinced like he is trying to more or less like almost like portray like a character. And the reason I say that is because for him to come out and just kind of literally call out Raw, like by name, and say Raw sucks, like that's a bold statement, as true as it may be, because Raw is, of the shows that are on TV, like on a regular basis, Raw is pretty abysmal.
Yeah.
That's the show that I'm going to watch pretty much last. I at this point, I'd probably watch Dark before I watch Raw, and that's saying a lot, because I as you guys know, who followed the show, I do not pay attention to Dark or Elevation or whatever those shows are called. But Raw is not good. But for Tony Khan, the owner of a pro wrestling company, to blatantly call out your competition and say that it's not good, you're essentially putting the company on blast, and you're calling them out by name, and just pretty much, you know, you're not just supporting your company at that point, but you're telling the wrestling fans that a show is pretty bad, and you're also alienating a certain subset of the fan, maybe that does watch both, as little or as many as it may be. I think the one thing that comes across almost as disingenuous to me, because we have been following AEW since the inception of it. AEW has always kind of claimed and tried to portray itself as the company that, look, we're not going to care about what WWE does. We don't care. We're going to focus on us. That's the continuous thing that they say, but they do quite the contradictory. If you're going to be the company that's going to go out there and continuously say, look, we focus on us, we're going to do what's best for us, we don't care about what WWE does. It's one thing to put a company on your back and support AEW and talk about how great it is and the environment and all that stuff. But if you're going to take shots, literally at this point, it's almost daily, at least it's been for the past 4 days. You know, now you are focusing on the competition, especially when you call it out by name, especially when you're calling out Vince McMahon and saying you want to go head to head and all these things. It's one thing to say that you have the best product, but you're not necessarily focusing on your product if you're going to go out and call out the competition.
But it's more to the fact that he's reacting to the fact that SmackDown, honestly, unnecessarily extends their show an extra half hour, commercial free, when Rampage is on.
So who says it's not necessary? Why are we saying that it's not necessary? We've long said on the show, competition is fine.
Okay. As someone that works in television, you usually see a television show go 30 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes, 2 hours, or 3 hours. Very rarely do you see 2.5 hours. Now, sometimes it's a movie, but even then they cut it down. It just seems very odd that SmackDown extended to 30 minutes. And why not an hour? It's just odd.
Let me just throw this out there. Now, there's been many times where things have happened, whether it be with like Bray Wyatt or somebody who is supposedly hurt, somebody's left out because of whatever the case may be. As we've seen over the past, let's say 6 months, Keith Lee is probably the perfect example of this. Making an assumption is a very dangerous thing to do when you don't know the backstory. So we can sit here, we can go back and forth and assume we all know that, okay, well, they did that to spite AEW, or we did that because it's competition, but we don't actually know that. It's an assumption that essentially was bred out there in the IWC that continued to get thrown out because sometimes people don't like the fact that WWE competes with AEW and AEW is going to compete with WWE. At the end of the day, whether it was the overrun, whether it was the buy-in, whether it was the war of words, or whether it's my cat going crazy and backing me this whole time we're having this conversation, because clearly he's bothered by it too. Did we get extra content if you're a WWE fan? Did we get Becky versus Sasha? Yes. Did we get a contract signing between Roman Reigns and Brock that had a little bit of intrigue in it? Yes. Did we get Minoru Suzuki and Bryan Danielson? Yes, we did. So out of this competition, at the end of the day, what the fans wanted is for WWE to put out a better product. What fans want is better matches and stuff to get invested in. And whether you're a WWE fan, an AEW fan, if you got what you wanted out of it, which is the point of competition, to hold people accountable and make the show better, isn't that a good thing? And I can't believe that people go out there and bitch and complain all over the internet that, oh, how could they give us Sasha and Becky for free? Really? That's what we're complaining about now? Like, that's the point of the competition, to hold people accountable, to make sure the product is better. And if it's going to make WWE put on a half-hour extra show and then AEW go and says, we're going to do a buy-in, isn't that a win-win for the industry?
Yeah, totally agree with what you're saying here. I think both companies put on really good shows this weekend, and Rampage had good matches. SmackDown, I think, had a really good showing. Regardless of it was the matches or the promos. I thought Edge's promo was awesome. The contract signing was very good. I think a little bit more than just a little intrigue. I thought there was a lot to it with Brock just going in and being like, yeah, I talked to Paul. We did this contract sign together. Matt Sydal and CM Punk had a really good match. So I think as a wrestling fan, you got to be happy that both these guys put out their best effort for whatever rating supremacy there was. Based on this recording, we know that SmackDown won the total viewership for their 2.5 hours compared to Rampage's 1 hour. But at this point, who cares about the damn ratings? If Tony Khan is right and actually beats Rampage or beats SmackDown, it'll be impressive, but we got good shows regardless. But let's talk about Saturday night quickly. AEW Dynamite starts off with Malakai Black versus Dante Martin. Very good match. I think Dante Martin sold the hell out of the knee injury. I think that definitely played into the storyline. The finish played into it where he tries to do a high-risk move. Lio Rush is like, don't do it. And then Malakai Black gets the win. Very good opening match here for Dante Martin and Malakai Black.
Yeah, I definitely like this match. I think that it showed that Dante Martin is not just a guy that can go out there and do a bunch of high spots. He actually put on a really good singles match against a guy who right now is just really hot, really protected. His finish is probably one of the most protected finishes, not just in AEW, but in wrestling in general. I know that they're building Cody up. I don't know if we're going to get into that whole discussion about the video packages, but those are effective. I just hope that they're not putting Cody in position to derail all of the momentum that Aleister Black has here, or Malakai Black. Sorry. But he is just on fire and one of the top guys in AEW.
Totally agree. And I think the video package was decent, told a good story, but I just hope this does not lead to Malakai Black losing to Cody Rhodes. It would just be the Anthony Ogogo thing, the Sean Spears thing that we see time and time again with Cody that people boo him for. So let's hope that's not the case. Inner Circle come out next. They're finally reunited after Santana and Ortiz show up on Rampage. They do a talking segment interrupted by American Top Team, little back and forth there. I thought there was some good, some bad with this. Yeah. I think Jericho with his interaction with Paige Van Zant was good. I think, Dan Lambert is good at what he does. Scorpio Sky had a good moment. I think Sammy Guevara, his promo was And the crowd was really into it regardless.
Yeah, so I continue to be kind of split on this. So the one thing that I'm not liking about this is the fact that Dan Lambert is very good at what he does, as you could tell by the reaction from the crowd, just mega heat for him.
Yep.
But the problem to me is, is the focus on American Top Team, or is the focus supposed to be on Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page? And Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky to me are just kind of left on the back burner. And especially coming off a couple of weeks ago, Ethan Page obviously proved he can go out there and cut more than an effective promo. And it just seems like this is more about Paige Van Zant and even Jorge Masvidal's thrown there, Junior Dos Santos, which, mind you, this is exactly why I don't like when MMA guys or UFC or boxing guys get involved in wrestling in some situations, because they look really bad. Junior Dos Santos to me looked horrible in that match. It was obvious that he was faking punches. It looked like, everything that you don't want to see in professional wrestling. And that's why I don't like this. Jericho was very good, but I just think that it's missing the focus to me, which is supposed to be getting Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page over.
Yeah.
I don't see it,
right.
And they are even suggesting, oh, well, the Inner Circle is back together. When did they break up? I mean, it's just
they
one
didn't.
of those things. It's like, I don't know. There's some elements I like. There's other elements I'm not a fan of. And overall, I mean, I guess I'm intrigued to see where it goes. I think Dan Lambert's good, but some of this, I just really wish it would kind of end.
Right. Lambert's good. I think one line that I heard from him this week that I just cringed was the whole thing about Hager's head being so big. What's he stepping into a t-shirt? That was a bad line, but everything else I did like from him. But let's move on to the next segment here. It is the AAA Tag Team Championship match. Andrade with a tag team of his choosing. It's the Super Reinas, I believe is how you pronounce it, which is Spanish for the Super Frogs. These two men that are dressed in green, basically AEW's version of the Conquistadors. Turns out to be FTR. They end up winning the match thanks to interference by Tully Blanchard. I thought the match was good, and I like the fact that FTR ended up pulling the victory because they really needed a big win in the tag team division.
I didn't mind the match. I thought the match was good. The one thing that I continue to be confused on, even after watching it back. So what was the point of involving Andrade? What was the point of MJF receiving payment? Like, what was the payment for?
I guess that's going to be determined in weeks ahead.
That's the thing, though. Like, if Andrade didn't influence the outcome of the match, which he didn't, essentially it was Tully Blanchard that came out and interfered. I don't know. I guess we'll wait and see. But at this point, I don't understand what the payment was. I just don't understand the whole thing about them coming up dressed up as conquistadors or luchadors or whatever. I don't know. But
maybe that explains why FTR and the Pinnacle dressed up in masks, beating up Darby Allin last night. FTR was getting ready for their match, dressing up as masks against the Lucha Brothers this week. But let's fast forward a little bit. I don't think we need to talk about Jon Moxley and Wheeler Yuta. That thing was, 5 minutes. Yeah. Teases a little something with Orange Cassidy and Jon Moxley. Maybe that's part of the Eliminator Tournament as they're both on the same side of the bracket. But MJF comes out expecting to face Darby Allin. He wants Justin Roberts to introduce him. Doesn't happen. Wardlow comes out with Bryce Remsburg, wants him to count to 10. And when it gets to 10, lights are out. Sting comes out with the bat. MJF throws Wardlow into the fire. He gets hit with the bat and runs away. I thought this was a very well-executed segment, Ralph. What'd you think of this?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. MJF just kind of at his best, getting under the skin of the fans there in Miami. It was effective. Thankfully, Sting didn't just walk out like without a bat or anything, and they made it work because, in the past sometimes they've made it seem like Sting is still like the Sting of old from WCW. But no, I thought this was good. I thought it was effective, and it kind of further progresses the storyline with MJF and Darby Allin, which I think to me is one of the better storylines going on right now. Yeah,
totally agree. Now, one of the better storylines as well, let's talk about heading into the AEW World Championship match at Full Gear. We have Hangman Page against Kenny Omega. That's definitely happening. It's confirmed. It's main eventing. So obviously you have Hangman Page with the Dark Order. You have Kenny Omega, part of the Elite. We got a 6-man tag last night. Adam Cole and the Young Bucks against Evil Uno, John Silver, and Alex Reynolds. This was a very good 6-man tag. little bit of, Rick Knox avoiding the count at times, but there were times where he was counting, but there was some really good tandem offense here. And I really like the spot where Adam Cole is doing the hold where he thinks the Young Bucks are going to kiss him, and it goes to the close-up, but instead it's Reynolds and John Silver. Very good spot there. Very entertaining match, I must say. And if this is what we're leading to, where the Dark Order helps Hangman and the Elite's going to help Kenny, helps progress that storyline. I like this.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, this was one of those matches where you kind of get a little nervous going into it because you don't know what you're going to get. If it's going to be just kind of a slop fest where it's all over the place, guys doing high spots, no referee taking control of the match. We got that a little bit, but I must say, like after the of all people, Evil Uno taking the greatest hot tag probably that he's ever taken in his whole career in AEW, coming into the ring, clearing the ring. Sacco made an appearance, which got a huge pop in it from that point on till the end of the match. I thought it was well worked. I did like the spot where Silver and Reynolds did do that kiss thing with Adam Cole. Good action down the stretch. I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was going to enjoy it. And you know what? For what it's worth, Dark Order came out of this looking pretty damn good. So, yeah, I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I totally agree. Dark Order looked amazing in this match. They definitely look strong in here. We did get a women's match here on AEW Dynamite. Penelope Ford against Kiera Hogan, where Penelope Ford gets the win in a fairly decent match. But I want to talk about Hangman Page because, keep it in line with what's going on with the Dark Order and the Elite. Hangman Page comes out. First time he's spoken to the crowd in the ring since he's returned from his little hiatus due to having his first child being born. And he basically goes over his entire timeline of him being in AEW from the beginning and how he lost his confidence, he lost his friends, he lost this, he lost that. But over the last few months, the crowd has been behind him and he's gained that confidence. He's gained who he was. And I just thought this was an amazing, amazing promo. And he's bringing the cowboy shit with him at Full Gear in the main event against Kenny Omega. That crowd's going to be very loud, I think, in Minnesota.
Yeah, I thought the promo was really good. I think that he really needed to knock it out of the park in order to get himself kind of back on track because the win itself to get him into this title match was really good. Now, as you pointed out, he did go away for a little while. Of course, some people, including ourselves, were a little concerned that he would lose some momentum, but the win on top of this promo to really drive everything home, I think really puts him in a good position to go and challenge for that title and really helps establish kind of where he was right before he left and puts him right back in that same position. I think people are certainly behind him. This promo was inspired. It made me feel like he can go out there and certainly carry the torch, not just in terms of what he's able to do in the ring, but he's showing now that we're getting this character or this side of him where we can see that he can go out there and just work on the mic as well, which, if you're going to be a huge star in pro wrestling, unless you're somebody like The Undertaker, where the aura is just that overwhelming, you need to be great on the mic. And this was a really good promo. I would put this up there in the same caliber of promo as like what Cody Rhodes as in terms of importance, because when he cut that promo back up maybe over a year ago about being undesirable and being undeniable, this was very similar. It documented kind of where he was when he entered AEW, the fact that he is now in a much different position, but he has the confidence to go out there and win this big match. And I thought it did everything that it needed to do, and it got him over, which is great.
Yeah, I gotta have to agree. I think Hangman Page answered anybody who had a problem of skepticism as to whether or not he can have that promo of being that top guy in AEW. Now, he's gotten some great character work. He's had some great matches, but was the promo there? Last night, I think, proved he definitely had that. And, I still think the AEW Championship is going to go to Hangman Page. I think a lot of people think that, but you never know what that could happen. They could swerve us, and then he gets derailed again, and you got to build him back up. And I think, the guy that is possibly able to dethrone Kenny Omega, if not Hangman Page, is Bryan Danielson. He's in the main event against Bobby Fish. I thought this was a very good technical match. I think both of them going after each other's legs, being both submission guys, was a very good touch to this. Daniel Bryan winning the match, going 3-0-1 since he's debuted in AEW, just 24 hours after his big match against Minoru Suzuki. I thought this was a very solid match, and we know he's going to be part of that Eliminator Tournament. He'll be facing Dustin Rhodes in the first round. What'd you think of this main event before we quickly go through the brackets?
I thought the match was definitely very good. I think the one downside or the one issue with it is obviously, I realistically didn't buy into Bobby Fish beating Bryan Danielson. And I think that kind of hurt the match a little bit because I think it was a foregone conclusion and made it a little difficult for the crowd to kind of get behind some of the false finishes, like with the submission or a near fall where he did like that avalanche Falcon Arrow off the top rope. So, it was a really good match. Bobby Fish has, despite losing, what is he, 1-2, I think right now.
Yes.
He's still been positioned in some pretty high profile match. You go back to his match with Sammy Guevara there. And now this match with Bryan Danielson main eventing Dynamite. So it's good to see that even though he did lose, he's still being utilized in a way where he's still meant to feel important. But despite all of that, it still was a very good match.
Yeah, I totally agree. And now, as I mentioned, Bryan Danielson versus Dustin Rhodes in the first round of the Eliminator Tournament. On the other side of his bracket is going to be Lance Archer versus Eddie Kingston. And then on that opposite side of the bracket, you have one match being Jon Moxley versus Dark Order's 10, Orange Cassidy versus Powerhouse Hobbs. Where do you see this one going? If the leaked picture of Tony Khan has anything to say, I believe in his notes there, if you could read his chicken scratch, said Moxley versus Daniel Bryan as a match at Full Gear.
Yeah.
I think the way that I see the brackets right now, Moxley against Orange Cassidy, based on what we saw last night, Bryan Danielson is going to beat Dustin Rhodes, obviously. I don't know who comes out of the Lance Archer-Eddie Kingston match. I think that's the only one that I think isn't a foregone conclusion. Unless they do go with Powerhouse Hobbs beating Orange Cassidy, which you would think they do, but they could do something to cover up Powerhouse Hobbs and protect him. But where do you see this going?
Yeah, I think the likely scenario and the likely match is Moxley and Bryan Danielson. I got to imagine there's got to be at least one upset. If there is one upset, I think it would probably be Orange Cassidy over Powerhouse Hobbs. Because Eddie Kingston and Lance Archer, that's kind of like a toss-up. Neither of them have really been positioned in a way to feel like they are at the top of the food chain, so to speak. So I think they're fairly even. Bryan Danielson, I imagine, would have to go pretty far in this tournament, if not to the finals. So if there's going to be an upset, Orange Cassidy over Powerhouse Hobbs, ultimately, I think we do end up getting Mox and Danielson.
If we get Mox and Danielson, who obviously have pasts, or right now, actually a current storyline in a way with Kenny Omega, do you think if that's the finals, Kenny Omega retains?
I don't think that's look. There's only so many times somebody can get this hot and get this much momentum in not just in a short period of time, but in their careers. Bryan Danielson literally had to go from WWE to AEW to get kind of to the point where he's super over, because I don't even think he was able to get to the point where he was as over as he was at the peak of the Yes movement. Guys go hot and cold all of the time throughout their careers. So I think that they need to capitalize on Hangman Page. I think that Bryan Danielson can certainly be a champion in AEW at any point down the road.
Same with Moxley.
Yeah, exactly. Moxley was already a champion. He can work his way back to the championship. He doesn't even necessarily need the championship right now, because at this point he's doing so many other things outside of AEW that have the fans kind of invested in him. He can go and chase the tag titles again if he wants to with Eddie Kingston. So there's enough things going on for both of these guys where I say, okay, you know what? They don't need to be champion right now. Put the belt on Hangman when he's hot. Let him run with it. Let's see what he can do with it. And I think that's the right call. I think you got to put Hangman over.
Totally agree. I think at this point we know Hangman's beating Kenny. I think we're getting Moxley versus Bryan Danielson. The question, though, is who ends up winning that tournament? I'm going to go with Moxley going over Bryan Danielson. That would be my pick.
Well, Moxley's been, of the guys that have come over from WWE, I think he's been booked the strongest. You know, when you
I
look at
would
his
agree.
record, and some of the wins he has had, he's been there for so long. He certainly only has a handful of losses in his whole career there. So,
And of all his losses, I don't think there's been a clean loss yet by him. He lost
not
the
in singles competition, I don't think.
right. He lost the death match to Archer for the IWGP US title. He lost the exploding barbed wire death match to Kenny, which had, you know, schmaz in there. He lost the title to Kenny Omega, which had schmaz on there. He walked out on the tag match with Pac, and Bryce Remsburg walked out too during that match.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really think of any other times he's lost. And well, he lost the tag match with the Bucks. And even then, that match was, you know, half the match, the Young Bucks were in the ring together. So I don't think he's really had a clean loss in AEW.
Yeah. So, I mean, whatever route they decide to go, I mean, if we're going to look at this from like a standpoint of the mindset of AEW, where ranking and wins and losses are supposed to matter, if you've booked Moxley that strong for this long, and supposing Hangman does win that match and wins the title, what better person to have Hangman get his first major win over as a defense than Moxley, the guy who's been booked so strong, who's been really kind of a cornerstone of the top stars and top guys in AEW. So that's my take. Bryan Danielson is always great as the underdog. So, you know, he doesn't need to necessarily win.
Right. Totally agree. Now let's see your predictions for the World Championship Eliminator Tournament in the comments below. Don't forget to like this, share it all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, SCPB Podcast. Subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Squared Circle Psychobabble.